and welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. I'm Raffi, joined by Davian. Davian, we have some stuff to talk about today. NHL, NBA Finals underway. Both series have gone 4 games so far, so there's some stuff to talk about. And in the meantime, there's also been some news in the NFL realm. So before we get into all that, Davian, how are you? How are things?
I'm good, Raffi. It's another weekend. Hey, the NBA Finals are actually better than we thought they would be. The Pacers actually know how to play. Well, when you sell your soul to the devil, I feel like that's gonna eventually happen. But also, the NHL Stanley Cup has been. Every game has been something exciting going on. How many games have gone to overtime? 2, 3 of the 4, right?
3 games. 3 games
Yeah,
have gone to overtime for a collective 4 periods of overtime.
Insane. Yeah. I think it's so cool, though. I think that this is really going to help the face of the NHL. Although I haven't really been watching as much, I still think it's really exciting. How you been, Rafi? What are your thoughts on these finals?
Yeah, the finals have been great. We're going to dive into that shortly, but to say that I haven't been entertained would be an understatement because I've loved all these games. The one game, Game 3, being a 6-1 Panthers whooping, even that was just the third period turned into a WWE fight, essentially, where both teams were just taking cheap shots at one another, especially the Oilers, which is funny because Oilers fans keep saying that the Panthers are the really dirty team, so kind of funny to notice that. But we'll dive into that a little bit more. But before we get into that, we do have some news that broke a couple days ago, or at least over a week ago, but that's when we were doing our NBA Finals prediction, so we'll cut ourselves some slack. And that's Aaron Rodgers. He is now officially a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this was very, very expected and anticipated. It was more of a when rather than an if it was going to happen. And finally, right before their minicamp started, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Aaron Rodgers signed a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Davian, your thoughts on this? Because my initial instincts and thoughts are you should have just kept Justin Fields around personally. He's 25, 26 years old and still has some potential. Why are you this just screams 9-8, 8-9 record in my mind.
Yeah. I think it really does. I think one thing I also add, I think that what Rodgers brings to the table working with a guy like Mike Tomlin, I feel like it's the perfect situation. So I think Mike Tomlin, he hasn't really, in his career, really built up a young quarterback, right? He had Ben Roethlisberger, who was there for years. And yeah, he built him up as a rookie to where he is now. And I feel like what Tomlin's getting now is another coming of Ben Roethlisberger in Aaron Rodgers with a better arm. Rodgers is just not as mobile as he was, but if you have a good O-line, which the Steelers relatively do, I think that's where they succeed. And I think this is going to be a playoff team, I think, potentially, if things click. I don't know if it's a Super Bowl contender. It's definitely not building towards the future. But the Steelers have never been a team that went into full rebuild mode. So I think it makes sense from the Steelers' perspective, but I feel like there's so many other QBs you could have taken. I don't understand why you don't take Shedeur Sanders in the draft when he was available in the 3rd round and the 4th round. But in any case, I'm sure the Steelers are going to figure it out. If not, they'll just kind of wait another year, wait another 2 years and try to go for Archie Manning or for one of the free agents that's going to come arise. So, yeah. What do you think of it, Rafi?
I just think the Steelers need to do one of two things. You have 2 options right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. One, blow it up.
Yep.
Or just outright just don't even sign Aaron Rodgers. Just go into the season with Mason Rudolph and then just whatever happens, happens. If you go 5-12, whatever. If you go 4-13, whatever. Get a good draft pick and then take one of the top quarterbacks. The Steelers have consistently been, over the past 7-8 years, just consistently mid since Ben Roethlisberger has retired. The team has made the playoffs numerous times, but they cap out as a first-round exit. And at this point, the standard is just make it to the playoffs and be above 500. And it's just completely defeating the purpose of what your actual goal is, and that's to win a Super Bowl. If the Steelers are too good right now to get a high-end quarterback. And so they have two options again. They have the option to tear it all down, or they have the option to, when there's a solid quarterback. Now, this year was a little different because it was clear cut. So Cam Ward was really the only really solid quarterback that was going to be available who had solid, like, top 15 quarterback potential.
Yeah.
But in years past, when there's been deep and solid quarterback classes, 2024, for example, trade up. If you're in that 15 to 20 range this upcoming season again, you need to trade up for a quarterback.
But that's only if there's somebody good, Rafi. You don't know if there's going to be anybody good. We thought that this draft class was supposed to be good, but there was nobody there.
Yeah, they should have done it a year ago. They should have traded
Agreed.
up. Oh, next one, 13, 12? There was 5 quarterbacks that went in the first 13 picks. The Steelers were at pick 18, 19? Trade up. Get into that top 10 and take your quarterback. At least there's a guy with some potential, rather than continuously spinning the wheel of mid of Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Aaron Rodgers. What are they doing?
Yeah.
They're just comfortable being a mid team that can just be over 500. And I think at the end of the day, this is Mike Tomlin knowing I'm too far into it. If the Steelers fall off, he's going to get fired. So I think he's just forced now, and the Steelers are forced to be like, we need to keep putting together seasons where we can make the playoffs just so we keep TJ Watt happy, which is the big thing. And now he's not happy because financial reasons. And also because they know if we can have a really bad year. Because if we have a really bad year, we're all getting fired. So I think it's just upper management and Mike Tomlin just realized at this point where it's like, we cannot afford to do that. And then if that's not the case, then again, you have the other case where just trade up for your guy. You couldn't do it last year, obviously, as we discussed this past draft. But there's been drafts before where they should have made, like, the 49ers, for example, were like, pick 11 when they made that big move up for Trey Lance. They traded, like, 3 first-round picks.
Yep.
There's no reason why the Steelers shouldn't do something like that, why they can't do something like that if there's a really deep quarterback class. Again, last year was their chance. They blew it, and they didn't even ride out Justin Fields, who was the guy with the most potential out of him and Russell Wilson. So, I don't know. I think they're just trying to hold things up for the sake of not, like, pushing off the inevitable because they don't want to get fired. And the time will come when they fall below 500, go 6-11 or something, and then everyone's just going to get fired anyways, and the Steelers are going to be in a worse off position because TJ Watt's prime's been wasted. They already traded George Pickens, one of their young wide receivers. They traded from DK Metcalf. I wouldn't be shocked if DK Metcalf gets traded within the next 3 years. I genuinely would not be shocked. So it just feels like they're just kicking things down the line, and eventually everything's just going to collapse like we saw with the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that the Steelers are not building towards the future, but in the immediate future, it's a good team, right? You have DK Metcalf, you have a good running back core, you have Aaron Rodgers. Like, this is a team that it's clearly is a playoff contender. I just don't know if they're a Super Bowl contender. And, I think I agree with you, Rafi, that I think, Mike Tomlin's just trying to save face. Save the organization, continue to try and be that mediocre mid, but continue to try and push and, be okay with being mid like that, which I just don't think is the best methodology. But, in any case, I think that this is a team that is primed for success this year if Rodgers can play well. If he doesn't, that, and honestly, I mean, they might make a trade for Kirk Cousins, I think, honestly. If coming around the midseason and they're not doing that great, I could see them trying to trade like a 4th-round pick for Kirk Cousins and have Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, and and then bring in a rookie, and then you can create like something like the Giants have, where you have Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and a rookie to help mentor that rookie.
Don't even bring in Kirk Cousins. It's just continuing the cycle. Start Will Howard for all. Just start someone young who has some potential. I don't think Will Howard's going to become a top 15 quarterback. But you know what Aaron Rodgers is. You know what Kirk Cousins was last year for the Falcons. Stop taking, and I love Aaron Rodgers and I love Kirk Cousins. They're both great. They both had their time when they were both top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs not even like 4 years ago. But you need to stop being comfortable with just recycled and mid quarterbacks. It's the most important position on your team.
But the thing is, Raffi, these mid quarterbacks, like I honestly do believe that there's a methodology of you have a mid quarterback, but that doesn't mean you won't be successful. And you know what I mean?
They're capping out as a first round exit if everything goes right this year in my mind. I think you just
first round exit.
Take a young. I think it makes more sense just to take a young quarterback and just try to play through the growing pains. But I don't know. This is why we're both talking about this on a YouTube podcast and not in a front office position right now. So, and it's not just because you're still in college and I did not study business management or anything that would lead me to being
anything that would
in a position to make these decisions. Although Carolina Hurricanes, one of their assistant or general managers, did get a master's in chemistry and got his bachelor's in chemistry. So I guess I'm close.
I mean, okay,
I guess I'm close enough to.
As a rocket scientist, dude. So
yeah,
so
Loki,
you could be an NFL head coach.
I'd like to believe I could be a solid GM at some point, but yeah. I think we're both kind of spinning the wheel and just kind of going around in circles at this point.
Ralph, you might be the type of coach that like run the same exact play, and then like even if it fails, you'd be like, "No, guys, I gotta run it again. We gotta run it again." You know,
Coach, we've run Hail Mary 20 straight times. It's not working. No.
Trust.
This time it'll work. Trust the process, as they say. So moving from an absolute tire fire because it's annoying me. Let's move into the NBA Finals. And so far we're knotted up at 2. It's been a really solid series so far, which means you can bet that I haven't watched any of this except for when I turn around at my bowling league and I look at the score in the background, the game in the background. But anyways, I've seen the highlights, I've seen the scores, I've been looking into the overall numbers, and I've been keeping tabs on the series. And David, this has been a really solid series. Game 4 was last night, where we saw the Thunder do a little bit of a comeback, came back on the Pacers, wound up winning that game to bring things all knotted up at 2, making it a best of 3 series. David, what were some of the key things that you noticed so far from this series that have kind of stood out to you? For the most part, these games have been pretty close and down to the wire. I know Game 3, the Pacers kind of held control of that lead for most of the game. So even though it was a 9-point game, they kind of had a nice little cushion for most of that game. Game 2 was certainly the Thunder's game. Really solid bounce-back game, which is what we anticipated. And then Game 4 was very close for the most part, and then the Thunder wound up coming away with the win at the end. So overall, your analysis so far in this series, and where do you think it's going to go?
Look, I mean, like what I said is that if the Pacers really play well, the only way that the Pacers win is if there's somebody that steps up. I thought it was going to be Halliburton, but then there's people like Benedict Mathurin with 27 points in Game 3. When they're moving the ball more, they're dominating the transition. That is how the Pacers are going to win. For OKC to win, they need their stars to step up, like Shea did last night. You know, dropping 14 points in the last 3 minutes. That is, this back and forth is not what we expected, but also, Raffi, what I told you is that the Thunder are going to beat themselves to the ground, not the Pacers are going to beat them. And what we've seen consistently throughout the series is that the Thunder have not been shooting well. From the 3-point range last night, they were terrible. Lou Dort, I think, shot 1 for 10, I want to say. It was some ridiculous stat. The Thunder were 1 for 10 in the first half. Lou Dort was the only person who made a 3 in the first half.
They were 3 for 16 the entire night. They didn't even. Clearly see it's like a confidence issue at this point with the fact that they only shot 16 threes.
You can't win without the 3-point range, especially like the team like the Thunder, where I feel like the Pacers are already more built in the paint to score in the paint, while I truly believe that this Thunder team is built more so to score from the 3-point range and kind of have ISOs just because of like the players that they have on the team, like Chet, SGA, Dort, Caruso off the bench, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the fact too that the Thunder won last night, even with shooting as little as they did from 3 and only making 3 3-pointers, just shows that they don't need to do too much to win these games at the end of the day. They just need to get... If they can play their game, most of these games are going to go like Game 2, where it gets a little close during the game, but overall you see the Thunder pulling away because they're the better team.
Yeah.
That's what we saw with Game 4 as well. It really happened in the fourth quarter where the Thunder finally locked in. But it just feels like if you let the Pacers stay around for too long, they're going to burn you. And that's been the story this entire postseason when it comes to the Pacers, where the Pacers hang around really close, they're within striking distance, snap your fingers, Pacers somehow win off a crazy Tyrese Halliburton game winner, etc. So if the Thunder can just play their game, then I think they're good. But I think at the end of the day, it's what we discussed previously, where the Thunder have their young core has had playoff experience. This isn't their first time in the playoffs, but this is their first time in the NBA Finals, and I think some of that is you're kind of getting that a little bit, where they're still trying to find their way, and they're still trying to figure out. This is the highest floor that they've ever been on, the highest. I don't know what the word is, but anyways, this is the biggest floor that they've been on in their entire careers, and they just need to remember. I think they just need to treat this like as any other playoff basketball game and just go into like that and not think, oh, the Pacers might come back. Oh, this team, we're not shooting well from this. Just play your game, and I think the Thunder will take care of business. I had Thunder in 6. I'm not too concerned. If you told me that the Thunder take care of things the next 2 games, I wouldn't be shocked. But I think I wouldn't be shocked if the Thunder feel a little uncomfortable right now with the fact that the Pacers are at 2 games apiece right now with them. Just because the Pacers are that team again that just linger around there, and you never know. Like they're plotting something. They're about to make a sacrifice to some extent, and then they're going to somehow win the next 2 games of the series.
Yep.
But I think if you're the Thunder, I think if you're the Pacers, you're really happy that it's 2-2. If you're the Thunder, you just need to remember to play your game, and then I think things will just move along. That's just my 2 cents on the series.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, it's not like the Pacers didn't play well. It's just that end of the fourth quarter where they collapsed. That's just not something you see very customary from Indiana, and that's brutal for them, right? You could have been going into Game 5 up 3-1. Instead, now it's 2-2. It's such a different ball game, I think, Raffi, being 2-2 versus up 3-1, or even being up 3-2. Because being even up 3-2, yes, the game's on the line, but you're only down by 1 game, right? So it's much easier for the other team to kind of like look at it like, okay, well, if we just win 2 more games, that's it. We win it all. Versus, so I don't know if that makes sense, Rafi, but, I feel like this is a completely different ball game.
100%. Any other final thoughts on this series before we move over to the NHL Stanley Cup Finals?
I'm excited to see what happens at the end. I think it'll be a really interesting series to close out.
All right, we'll move over to the NHL Finals. Davian, any thoughts before we hand it over to myself, where I ramble for the next 10 minutes and then close the show? Any thoughts so far on the Stanley Cup Finals?
I mean, look,
or anything that you want to ask me as the residential hockey watcher?
Yeah. I mean, look, you have 3. It's the fact that we've had 4 games and 3 of them going to overtime has been really, really exciting. Yes, you've had, the Panthers blow out like the Oilers in, what was it, game 1, 6-1. But then, the Oilers have been coming back, and now this is a series that is tied 2-2, and I think that, how it closes out, it's getting trippy and dirty, but I think that's the beauty of hockey. And I think that, these next few games are going to be absolutely amazing to watch.
100%, and it's overall things have been pretty close, especially where you look at games 1 and game 4, and in game 1, Panthers were up 3-1 in that game. Oilers wind up coming back to win that game in overtime. Then you have game 4, where the Panthers were up 3-0 at the end of the first. Stuart Skinner gets pulled for Calvin Pickard, and then the Oilers wind up coming back. Then they go up 4-3. The Panthers score with 20 seconds left to tie the game, and then the Oilers, Leon Draisaitl, who right now in my mind is the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, regardless of how the series winds up ending, winds up scoring the game winner to put the Oilers up 5-4 and tying the series. We're very, very close from being a sweep, and we're very, very close to being 3-1 Oilers in this series. So things have just gone back and forth consistently. The Panthers, at the end of the day, they have been the better team. They've led for almost this entire series. I think the Oilers have only led this series for like 30 minutes, and they've played essentially 5 games when you add over 5 games when you add all the overtime periods together. 5 games in 1 period, and the Oilers have not led in most of that. They've trailed in most of it. So the fact that they're tied at 2 is pretty impressive. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this game 5 tonight as we're recording this podcast on Saturday, just because It's a best-of-3 series at this point. The Oilers have home ice advantage, but the Florida Panthers, in my mind, have been the better team. It just comes down to, similar to what we've been saying with the Thunder, keep your foot on the gas. Don't let the other team back into it, and that's been the big thing. And it's been a great series. Game 2, we saw the latest goal in the NHL Stanley Cup final history with Corey Perry's tying goal with less than 20 seconds left. And then Game 4, we see Sam Reinhart score with 22 seconds left for the second latest goal ever in Stanley Cup finals history. So it's been a great series. I can't wait for the next 3.
I agree. And, we've had people on the Panthers step up that, Raffi, I kind of mentioned in our preview of this series, like people like Brad Marchand, bringing him in, he's clearly been a veteran presence on this team, but he's clearly also shown that, this is he's a rat man for a reason, scoring multiple times and, having multiple points throughout the series. Those are players who are key factors for like a Panthers team who's, coming off a championship and coming back again, and, they're trying to go back to back, clearly.
Yep, and it's going to be interesting because I know Florida wants to get another Stanley Cup, because when you look at their big brother in the past, the Tampa Bay Lightning have 2 Stanley Cups in 2020, 2021. So you better bet that the Panthers are going to look to tie that up at 2 apiece, at least in 2020, because the Lightning have another Stanley Cup in 2004. Any final thoughts on the Stanley Cup final before we wrap things up?
No, I think it's just super exciting, Raffi, you are the resident hockey analyst, so I think a series like this is what's gonna bring up the viewership to the NHL, for the NHL. Having such exciting games, having people watch more and more of the games throughout the series, I think is going to be extremely beneficial for the NHL. And I think that in total, what you're seeing in the NHL and the NBA is that small market teams make for a good show. And I just can't wait to see what this does towards the entire realm of sports, right? Because now all of a sudden having the most amount of money doesn't mean anything, especially on the NBA side. And on the NHL side, it'll be interesting to see how this affects the future of hockey and the viewership and everything like that, and the expansion of teams. Like you're having an old time team with like in Edmonton versus playing a team like the Florida Panthers, in a warm environment. I think it'll be interesting to see if this kind of helps inspire the expansion of the NHL into warmer climates again, and move past the failures of something like the Arizona Coyotes. And potentially find new areas for the growth of the sport.
Bring back the Atlanta Thrashers. Make it happen.
Facts.
Come on. There's been talks about that potentially happening over the next couple of years. Bring back the Atlanta Thrashers. It didn't work out the last 2 times the NHL team was in Atlanta, but this time I say it will work surely. And I say that
They must.
They just need a decent owner group and competent people leading that team, and it should do better. So bring back the Atlanta Thrashers. And with that, I think it's a good spot then to close the podcast. So we hope you enjoyed. Let us know your thoughts so far on the NBA NHL Finals. Let us know about the conundrum that is the Pittsburgh Steelers in the comments below. As always, we'll be back next week as well. Certainly, at that point, these 2 series will likely both be done by then. So we'll have some more NHL content, NBA content coming shortly as well, especially with the offseason coming up. So stick around. Be sure to like this video as always. Subscribe to the channel as well. Tell your friends. Have a good one, and we'll see what happens next. See ya.
Peace.